Welcome to the On the Line with Global Line podcast, where we discuss the good, bad, ugly, and everything in between right here in Hollywood. From business to entertainment, sports, culture, lifestyle, and more, we're bringing you unfiltered and unapologetic opinions and insights from the millennial publicists and digital marketing experts in the field. So stay tuned and don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Welcome back to the On the Line with Global Line podcast, where we get into the good, the bad, the exciting, and the sometimes ugly, and all the happenings that are happening within the entertainment industry. And I am very beyond excited for our episode today because I am here with the man, the myth, the legend, and the name on our walls, Phil Lobel himself. Hi, Phil.
Hey, will that intro get me a tax deduction? I don't know.
Let me talk to the CEO about that one. Okay. Thank you so much for joining me.
My pleasure.
It's so great having you here.
Nice to be here with you.
Yeah, and I know that we have a little history because you worked with my grandpa back in the 80s. My grandpa came to Global Line.
Yes, Reggae Sunsplash, and I've known you since you were before birth. So, since your mom was backstage at Reggae Sunsplash 7 months.
Wow.
So yes,
wow.
We have a long history together.
That's incredible. And I remember growing up always hearing about incredible things because getting into the PR industry was always a passion of mine. And my parents used to speak highly of Phil Lobel and Lobel Communications and everything that he did with Reggae Sunsplash. So I want to get into that a little bit. Take us back to, I would say, maybe the first time that you even got into the PR industry, which was, of course, over 30 years ago. Was it even known as public relations? What did that look like then, and why did you want to get into it?
Yeah, it was public relations, but I had started doing this in college at the University of Colorado in Boulder. I was the student programmer on campus. So from 18 until 22, I was with concerts every night, doing events and overseeing the PR, the advertising, everything that went into it. And then won the Billboard Magazine College Talent Buyer of the Year award and took that as my degree, sent that home to my parents, and went to work for the big promoter out of Denver, Fayline, Barry Fay, and did that really until I decided to start my own PR company in LA in 1986. But I knew about PR and I had worked with talent publicists. I was just on the promoter side.
Sure.
And I would work with the publicists out of Hollywood usually. So I knew what to do both locally in Colorado, and I knew where I would give direction to the publicists that were out of Hollywood that we were working with when we would promote artists. But I wanted to eventually just be on that side. So I packed up everything, moved my U-Haul, and ended up in Los Angeles. Started Global Line Communications in January of 1986.
That's incredible. Yeah. So coming from Colorado, which is, of course, a completely different scene, into LA, into the LA media.
Yes, I went from being a big fish in a little pond in Colorado. I mean, I had been doing the Rolling Stones, the Eagles, the Beach Boys, Fleetwood Mac when I was a student, when I was 20, 21, 22, in stadium concerts. And then coming to LA, and I'm, a speck on the map and a little nobody.
Sure.
And that was challenging to overcome that. And, I had to reach into my Rolodex and reach out to contacts that I'd worked with over the years. And that's how I got some of my first clients, actually.
That's incredible. Yeah. So it's kind of that networking that you already had, that Rolodex that you had that got you into, because you came from Colorado, like you said, big fish in a small pond, to being a very small fish in a huge pond
in an ocean.
In an ocean, yes. Exactly.
Yes.
But then you worked with some of the biggest names in the industry today.
Right. Well, I was of the mindset that I had to put food on the table. There was just no way that there was no 8 to 5 day. It was really 24/7 with a few hours sleeping to make it work. And I just figured that if I got the clients that I needed to start the business, I would do a better job than anybody else and run circles around other people, and because I had to. And that was kind of the school of thought that I came from when I was a student concert promoter and a professional concert promoter. At the end of the day, if you don't publicize it enough, your sales aren't enough. You end up with red ink at the end of the night instead of being in the black. So it was always about, never taking no for an answer and going. And yeah, I got a lucky break with a few clients in the very beginning, but the big lucky break happened a year and a half into my stint here in LA, when an old friend of mine that had also been a college promoter out of San Diego while I was doing it out of Boulder, he had become a talent agent, and then he became a manager, and he called me up and said, I've left the agency and I'm going with my artist solo, who's going solo, and he's looking for a publicist. And I said, well, who's the artist? And he said, George Michael. And I said,
wow.
Oh, that guy from Wham. and he said, no, don't hold that against him. Let me send you over a cassette tape, which I had for my Sony Walkman, and listen to it and tell me what you think and call me back. Let me know if you want to meet with George. And I did, and it was George Michael's big Faith album, his first solo album.
Wow.
And I listened to it, and I listened to it again, and I listened to it again. It was on a Friday, and I called Rob back, and I said, Rob, you have 6 or 7 number one hit singles on this. And he goes, yes, we know. Do you want to meet George? And I said, oh, absolutely. So we set up a meeting for that week, Friday. He cautioned me that George does not want to do interviews on the tour in support of the album. And don't talk to him about wanting to or needing interviews. Otherwise, you're not going to get hired. Because we met with 3 other publicists, and he's rejected them all when they told him that. So I went into this meeting at Rob's house up in the hills above Beverly Hills, and I was in this room waiting for them to come in, and George walks in his tennis outfit with a tennis racket and says, hi, I'm George Michael. And I go, oh, I know who you are. I'm Phil Lobel. He says, well, you probably heard that I don't want to do interviews to support this album or for the tour. And I said to him, yes, Rob did mention that to me, but that's not a problem because I come from the school of concert promotion where we often didn't have the cooperation of the artist. But at the end of the day, we had to sell tickets so that we'd end up in the black. So that's my background. If you don't want to do interviews, you don't have to do interviews. And he kind of looked at me and he said, really? I said, yeah, I'll come up with creative ways to get you press and don't worry about interviews. And he goes, okay, great. I got a tennis lesson. Nice meeting you. Bye. And then Rob comes in the room and goes, have you seen George? And I'm like, yeah, he's here and gone. He's out on the tennis court practicing. And he goes, oh, okay, well, we'll let you know. That was on a Friday. I waited Saturday for a call. I waited Sunday for a call. Finally, on Monday, I called Rob back. And I said, Rob, so what's happening? And he goes, you're the first publicist he hasn't rejected. It's a fait accompli. We're hiring you. Send us the contract. You're his publicist.
Wow.
And that's how I got the gig.
Wow.
By default. But luckily, once I got into it and dug deeper, now that I'm his publicist, I asked if they had any interviews that he had done about the Faith album. And it turned out that they had a lengthy 3-hour interview that they had done for the MTV networks, where George talked about every song on the Faith album.
Wow.
So I said, can I get a copy of this? And Rob said, yeah, sure. What's your idea? I said, well, I got this new thing called a Macintosh. This is September of 1987. And I can take the tape that you send me, have it transcribed by a transcriber, and put it all onto a thing called a floppy disk. And I put the floppy disk in the computer, and then I can search out keywords. So I will get media to fax me questions for George Michael. I will look at the faxed questions, find the answers on this transcript, and print out the answers and fax the answers back from George's words. And he goes, wow, that's a great idea. Just let us know what's happening. But yeah, they're George's words. Go for it.
Yeah.
And we did 137 interviews on the Faith tour that year. That way, with fax interviews. And we had 6 number one hit singles, and the rest is history.
That's incredible.
So that was my first big lucky break.
And that is such a huge experience in and of itself, because 137 interviews with George Michael not actually having to do not one.
Right, and there was a difference then. So, okay, you talk about the difference today and then. There was no social media.
Sure.
There was no internet. There was nobody in Chicago Tribune that was seeing that there was the same interview with the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, unless they got every paper around the country.
Sure.
So there was no way to see that the answers were the same. And also, back then, there was no internet, so there were no emails. we had to fax out weekly press releases to 1,000 places.
Wow.
And we also had the benefit of, that was the year that Michael Jackson's Bad album came out. So I wanted to elevate
Ooh.
George Michael to the level of Michael Jackson.
Huh.
And so I came up with this line, the Battle of the Michaels. And every time Michael Jackson's single would be dropping from number one and George Michael's single would be going up, I would go, the Battle of the Michaels continues this week as George Michael's I Want Your Sex goes to number one, passing Michael Jackson, falling out to number 9.
Wow.
And I did that week after week after week, and then all the radio shows started picking up on that line. And I would listen to Casey Kasem's Countdown or the Dick Clark Countdown, and they'd go, and this week, big news as the Battle of the Michaels continues. And
Wow.
I almost got into a car wreck the first time I heard that in my car, because I said, oh my God, they took my line right off the press release.
That's
and so
incredible.
that was kind of how we elevated George Michael to Michael Jackson's level. And
Wow.
those 2 albums, Bad and Faith, were the vying for the number 1 spot all through the course of 87 and 88.
Wow.
With, like I say, we had 6 number 1 hit singles on the Faith album.
That is mind-boggling. And again, you're working during times that a lot of us today in the PR industry can't even relate to, because you're talking about cassette tapes and floppy disks and faxing. Like nowadays you have something as simple and easy as a chat GPT, which is a piece of artificial intelligence that literally writes out, that can potentially write a pitch for you. And then you just hit one button and it gets sent to thousands and thousands of journalists.
Yeah, I mean, it was challenging because I was a one-man show back then. And so I just decided that I would get up at 5 a.m. and literally call the East Coast and music and entertainment media, and then be their first call when they got in the office at 8:30 in the morning.
Sure.
And they would go, where are you calling from, LA? And I go, yeah. They said, it's 5:30 in the morning there. I said, I'm so excited about this album. That's why I'm calling you this early. And they took note of that.
Yeah.
So I was just working harder than anybody else to make this work. And it did. And it put me in a situation where we were representing the number 1 artist in the world at that time, which gave me a whole slew of new contacts throughout the media. And the media were coming to me for interviews. And I was building up my Rolodex and entertainment industry contacts by having the number 1 artist in the world.
That's incredible. And again, thinking outside of the box as far as how to really promote your artist or whoever your client is with limited resources, not much participation from the talent.
None.
But you still have, and then you have that continuity whereby even when the Faith tour was over, you still have people talking about the Battle of the Michaels.
Right. And the other thing was that George knew exactly what his image should be. So he had some of the best photographers in the world taking pictures. And even if you had 300 images on one day, he would pick one image from that photo shoot. But I had incredible artwork, which again, you didn't email artwork. You had a color slide or a color transparency, and you FedExed it to the newspaper. So even before the interviews were done by fax, because sometimes there was resistance, I would get the artwork sent to the newspaper. And once the photo editor saw this amazing artwork, the photo editor would tell the reporter or the journalist, we want to put this on as a cover story. So make the interview happen. So there was always pressure on the journalist who maybe was reluctant to do a fax interview.
Sure.
His editor is saying, we want this for a cover story. This artwork is incredible.
Sure.
So I had that as a great tool to kind of enhance the opportunity for getting cover features in every city that we went to around the country.
Absolutely. And that still remains true today as far as the power of an image.
Yes.
And you went from representing artists such as George Michael to someone like the late Aaron Carter.
Yes.
I mean, God rest his soul, but those are 2 completely different genres of music almost during 2 completely different times that you're representing them. How was that? How was that relationship?
I mean, there was a progression. I mean, what happened after George Michael, the next big artist to come into contact with me was David Copperfield, the magician, the illusionist.
Yes,
and really that came about because he had 3 songs in his show that he had 3 illusions in his show that used the songs from George Michael. And one of his producers said, I know George Michael's publicist. I think you could use some image, a new publicist, some new image. And so they reached out to me because of the music of George Michael being in a David Copperfield show. I met with David Copperfield, and he had been frustrated by publicists never really understanding what to do with a magician. And I said to him, well, I don't know about your other publicists, David, but how many of your other publicists were like me, Jews from Jersey that did magic and ventriloquism in their garage? And he said,
not many.
Not many. And we were at the same age, and we were both doing magic and ventriloquism at the same time at 9 years old in our garages in New Jersey. And so he was like, "You got me there. Okay, you're hired." and I became David Copperfield's publicist in December of 93. And at that time, again, timing is everything. He had just met the supermodel Claudia Schiffer. And I said, "David, what about this supermodel that you're dating?" And he goes, "Yeah, I'm falling head over heels for her." And I said, "I think we could really do something with that. It's she's kind of like number one with a bullet." And sure enough, we did. The first break on that story was in Liz Smith's The Gossip Columnist column. And before you knew it, we had them together being photographed for the cover of Esquire magazine.
Wow.
And then in February of 94, Claudia, as a Revlon spokesman, was invited to the Oscars, and we paraded him down the red carpet at the Oscars in February of 94 with all the world's media there. And it exploded like nobody could imagine.
Sure.
And it was David, Claudia. They were the it couple.
Yes.
For 3 years when they were together, wherever we went. And I was on the road with David 21 days a year, creating stories in every city that we went to.
Sure.
So that was my next big success, which then led to Tony Robbins, the internet,
right.
was a late night, infomercial.
Right.
Tony Robbins had one of his people that worked for him was now working for Tony Robbins, saw the transformation of David Copperfield on the media, and reached out to me and said, "Sam tells me you're David's publicist and you're the one responsible for changing his image and elevating his image. And I want to meet with you in Los Angeles when you're back." And that's how I met with Tony Robbins. And I saw him as more than just a late night infomercial guy. I listened to his stories and transformed him into becoming a regular personality on The View, talking about women's issues and relationships, going on Larry King Live, talking about business and business opportunities.
Right.
And we really put him into the mainstream.
Sure.
We even had him on The Tonight Show with Jay Leno at one point in time.
That's huge.
So one thing led to another.
At the time when Tony Robbins came to you, he was only known as the infomercial guy.
Yes.
What was his vision to become kind of this global motivational speaker, or did he just know that he wanted to be more than what he was at the time?
He wanted to break out of this being known as the infomercial guy. And so I went to his events, but I watched a lot of his tapes. And on those tapes, he would talk about relationships. So when I called The View producers up, they were like, "That infomercial guy?" And I go, "Wait a second, your show is geared toward women. You need to listen to and watch on a video what he talks about when it comes to relationships. And I want you to see that, and you tell me if it's not perfect for your audience." I would send them that clip, and they call me back, and they go, "My God, we had no idea. Yes, Tony would be perfect for The View." And he was on The View maybe a half a dozen times.
Wow.
Even helping one of the co-hosts at the time with her weight issue.
Wow.
So
no
he really got integrated into the show. And same thing with Larry King. Larry King found him as an amazing host.
Yeah.
It always, wherever he appeared, it lifted up his ratings. And he had that amazing resort in Fiji that he built from scratch with bures on a lava outcropping along a little island. And I heard about that. I saw pictures about it, and I saw that as an Architectural Digest cover. And I had done an Architectural Digest cover in '95 with Copperfield, so I saw this as another opportunity for an Architectural Digest cover. It had never been photographed, and I pitched them, and they bit, and we had a week-long photo shoot. And so in '98, Tony Robbins Resort in Fiji, Namali, was put on the cover of Architectural Digest.
And talk about just getting, your clients and your talent into different types of sectors of the media, because someone like Tony Robbins, who again at the time was known as the infomercial guy, you're breaking him out into all of these other sections to speak about, and then you get him on the cover of Architectural Digest. I mean, that's just propelling. And a common theme that I see amongst all of that is just the amount of passion that you had and the belief that you had in your clients that really kind of helped one thing lead to the next to the next.
Well, right. In some ways, I mean, I remember when I first approached the idea of Architectural Digest on David's amazing private museum in Las Vegas, on how it would be just an amazing insight and could be a cover for Architectural Digest. And he almost kind of poo-pooed it. He just didn't even see the relevance.
Sure.
But I really believed in it, and I had pictures taken, spec pictures, and I submitted it to Architectural Digest.
Yeah.
And they said, yes, we want to do a cover story. And it was the same thing with Namali. So even sometimes when the clients didn't believe that this was right for them, or they just found it like an impossible reach, I believed that it was attainable. And so I would pursue it.
Absolutely. You know? And I think a lot of that stands true to today, just as far as, again, the legacy that you've built and created, the fact that again, in Hollywood, small fish in a huge ocean, Lobel Communications is still at the forefront of so many different kind of successes, if you will, on behalf of clients within the PR industry, and taking that sense of creativity, not having possibly much to work with, and then realizing how else you can kind of spin the story, if you will, to kind of get to that next level. And I think that I see that being emulated still today, ranging from the David Copperfields of the world to the Stephen A. Smiths.
Yeah, I mean, it's just thinking outside of the box. I mean, even with Aaron Carter, who I represented from the time he was 8 years old, opening up on the Nickelodeon All That Music and More Festival with 98 Degrees and No Authority. And I represented him till he was 16.
Wow.
And then again, when he was 30, when he put out his Sony album, his last album, before his tragic passing, which, by the way, is a Hulu special now that I participated in for NBC News. Even with Aaron, you know, that connection was, he was the little brother to Nick Carter from the Backstreet Boys. And so that was a hook that kind of helped enhance the media opportunities for him. And even at one point, we got him on Entertainment Tonight because he was performing in Canada, and I got his brother to agree to surprise him on stage, and I arranged this with Entertainment Tonight. So Entertainment Tonight was there covering the surprise meeting of Nick Carter surprising his little brother Aaron Carter on stage in Toronto. So again, it was always thinking outside of the box. And you know, Aaron was a very became a dear friend, and I was there through those formative years from 8 to 16, and before all the problems and issues came up, you know.
Sure. And speaking of just creative out of the box, what I really loved, or one part that I really loved of that Hulu special, was when you were talking about that red carpet appearance with Hilary Duff and kind of creating a moment out of that. Talk to us about how did that unfold? And
that's interesting because, you know, there was this kind of all these rumors going on about Hilary Duff and Aaron Carter, Hilary Duff and Aaron Carter. And so Hilary invited Aaron Carter to her first big movie premiere in Hollywood at the Egyptian Theater. And I saw that as a really great opportunity to really kind of solidify this Hilary Duff, Aaron Carter story in the minds of the fans and the public through the media. So I said, Aaron, I'm going to go with you in the limo. We're going to show up at the theater, but we're going to stop at a florist beforehand, get a big a floral arrangement of Hilary's favorite flowers. And once her limo gets there, you're going to wait till she gets out of the limo. And as soon as she's approaching the red carpet with all the paparazzi there, you're going to get out of the car. You're going to go to the start of the red carpet, and you're going to present Aaron with these flowers. And the cameras flashed, and the news media just captured this whole thing. It was an incredible session. And then after the movie, Aaron comes running up to me and his mother and goes, Mama, guess what? Hilary wants to go steady. So it became a big deal. You know, but it was very much orchestrated.
Yeah. I remember being in grade school, and like Hilary Duff and Aaron Carter was always like, everybody wanted it to happen, but nobody really knew what it was. And I remember seeing that moment in like the pictures, and like MTV News, I believe, covered it at the time. And I remember just screaming at the top of my lungs. So I was like, this is so beautiful. So to know, like, again, things coming full circle, and just when you see an opportunity, being able to not just think of the opportunity, but effectively executing and creating such a huge splash. And I mean, your your name is on the wall. The list of clients speak for themselves, but you've really kind of dabbled in different industries, from the George Michaels to the David Copperfield,
Right.
and then even to Lisa Vanderpump. And now we're talking about
Right.
reality TV and
Yes.
restaurants.
Right. And Lisa came to me when she was getting ready to open Pump. I was a neighbor, and I was always walking my dog by by when they were getting the restaurant ready for development and putting in the olive trees. And she saw my dog, my Labradoodle Lucy, and wanted to own it, own her. Like, can I have your dog? And I go, no, you can't have my dog, but I can come visit all the time if you want a publicist. And so that's how that came about, really, over my dog Lucy.
Wow.
And yeah, we there's a wall in Lisa's house at Via Rosa that is nothing but cover stories of covers that we got her over the 6 years that we were working with her
incredible.
during the time of Pump Restaurant and the opening of Tom Tom Restaurant, and when she was both on Real Housewives of Beverly Hills and on Vanderpump Rules.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it's I think even though it's different sectors, and you don't really see a lot of PR firms being able to kind of execute successfully in that. But again, the understanding of how the media works, the passion and belief that you have in your clients, it's really, and then of course the creative thinking and the outside of the box thinking, it's really the sky is the limit as far as what you can really do. And it's really incredible because your story in and of itself is so inspirational. You went from being a promoter, which is a completely different field, to publicity. And then you're really having a company in the heart of the entertainment industry, representing some of the biggest names within the entertainment industry. What is one piece of advice you would give to someone who might be too scared or doesn't have the courage enough to kind of put one foot out in front of the other and chase that dream?
Well, it's three things. Believe in yourself, leave no stone unturned, and never accept no for an answer.
That is actually something that buzzes around these four walls often. Is Phil always says, never take no for an answer. And every single time I'm like in the middle of a deal or what have you, or working with clients or the media, that replays in my head.
And I remember where I was actually once complimented on that by a journalist. I grew up in the New York City tri-state area, New York and New Jersey. And Dr. Frank Fields, the weatherman, I grew up with. I was a weather junkie, took meteorology in college. I couldn't miss the weather before dinner. And so when I started my PR company, really this is talking about 1988, I got a client and I was pitching Newsweek. The reporter had actually gone to high school with me in New Jersey. Oh. And I was on an anti-stuttering device, a device that gave feedback through vibration from your throat to your ears. And if you have this on, it's like when stutterers sing, they don't stutter. Or if they're singing with other people, they don't stutter. It's a feedback situation.
That's interesting.
So anyhow, I pitched Dr. Frank Field on this for 10 months. He kept saying, no, the time's not right.
Wow.
No, call me back. Reach out to me next month. I don't have time. Suddenly, 10 months later, after pitching, I get a call from Dr. Frank Field. He goes, Phil, you still representing that anti-stuttering device? I have a cancellation this week. I need something to fill. Can you hook me up with a doctor and a patient, and I'll get you on the air?
Wow.
And I was like, oh my God, yes, I will. So I called the client back and I said, you've got to find me a doctor and a patient. Dr. Frank Field, the weatherman that's also the doctor and does the news science stories on WNBC in New York, wants to do a story. And this was following, at this point, the Newsweek story. So we got it all set up. He did the story. It aired. I get a handwritten note from him in the mail a couple of weeks later. Not an email, a handwritten note saying, I've got to tell you that I have worked with many, many publicists in my career, but you were the most tenacious one that I ever had the honor of working with. And congratulations, it was a great story, well received by by the news.
Wow.
And I was like, oh my God, Frank Field, my idol growing up, is thanking me for pitching him and not letting the story go.
Wow.
10 months.
Wow.
10 months.
Wow.
Because I believed in the story and would not take no for an answer.
I love that. That's incredible. And again, that's your idol. So even in many instances, people, I don't know if it's, and not ego in a negative sense, but just, not wanting to kind of keep pushing and pushing and pushing because you don't want to put yourself out there or you're afraid of that rejection. But, understanding that that's something that you completely, I mean, I would say, and like perseverance, the tenacity and the perseverance, because Battle of the Michaels, and then you have radio stations talking about Battle of the Michaels. Yeah. So that's perseverance and tenacity. I think are two really incredible qualities that we've had the honor of kind of witnessing coming from you, and kind of continuing the legacy, if you will. And again, working with things during that time where things were so different. It's not, you don't have as much easy access as you do today.
Well, it was more phone and talking than it is email today. But even when it comes to your grandfather's Reggae Sunsplash tours that we were doing in the early 90s, again, I never accepted no for an answer, and I really wanted to get national visibility. So I would go with your grandfather down to the Reggae Sunsplash shows that were in Montego Bay in Jamaica, and we would get footage, and I would give it to CNN International in New York, and they would air it every year as one of the events happening in Jamaica on their international coverage segment. And it brought instant visibility to reggae across America, and really helped with the tour that was happening city to city that your grandfather did in the USA. And even when it came to getting on the Tonight Show with Jay Leno, I kept pitching them, and then they didn't want it. And finally I said, what if all the reggae artists did a 5-song Bob Marley medley? And you could say a Bob Marley medley from the superstars of reggae, Sunsplash. I think, let me pitch that to my executive producer at the Tonight Show, which was Debbie Vickers. And they loved the idea. Wow. So we got the artists on the Reggae Sunsplash tour, the lead singers or the lead guitarists, to create a 5-song Bob Marley medley, songs that everybody knew. And they did a 5-minute music segment on the Tonight Show promoting Reggae Sunsplash. While I couldn't get them individually on, I was able to piggyback on the legend of Bob Marley and get Reggae Sunsplash on the Tonight Show for the first time ever. Absolutely. So from CNN to the Tonight Show, it really elevated your late grandfather's tour. And when I would go to Jamaica and meet with some of his business associates, and they would, be like, "Oh, Phil Lobel, making us famous in the USA, here, smoke this." It was,
take a load off.
I was very, very, very much in their good graces, because I was bringing the music and the message of reggae music to an audience in the US, which they had struggled to get into mainstream.
Yeah, because at the time, I remember Bob Marley was kind of the biggest thing, but anything outside of Bob Marley was little to not recognize at all.
Right, and I had worked with Bob Marley when I was a student, before his death from a brain tumor. And I mean, who knew back in 1978 that he was going to become the godlike, legendary figure that he did.
For sure. Every corner of the world.
Bob Marley,
that's incredible. Right. And again, looking at, we're talking about the 70s, we're talking about the 80s and 90s, getting something like reggae music on the Tonight Show and CNN and, just really in a vast space in the US, talking a lot about how things are so different back then versus how they are now. And I've heard you say that, things don't just live in the traditional kind of print anymore, and print to an extent is dying nowadays. How do you see how we've expanded kind of that service offering to be able to match what people are consuming today?
Well, I think today it's so much more gratifying because once upon a time, the story that I got in Newsweek or the New York Times or in the LA Times would only be seen by those readers. Now it has a shelf life ad infinitum that goes on and on and on through hundreds of thousands of people or millions of people if it's viral. So you take what you're doing still maybe with traditional media and amplifying it to a worldwide audience. And so everything that we do today has become amplified and that much more impactful. So I would say the luxury of having both traditional media and the internet and social media has made the role of a publicist that much more powerful.
Absolutely.
In America today and around the world.
Absolutely. And we've, of course, at Lobel expanded the services into digital marketing, into kind of that digital and social media space. So, and we see on a daily basis where you have the publicists working with the media, talking to the digital marketing team, looking at how we can kind of blow the story up a little bit more. And, you know, when it comes to digital marketing, when you put a little bit of ad spend behind it, it has a potential to reach hundreds of thousands.
Right.
So just like you had said, you know, I see so many moments like the David Copperfield photos with Claudia that you had mentioned, the Battle of the Michaels, like the Hillary Duff and Aaron Carter. Those are viral moments.
Right.
And had those happened today, I mean, it would
Millions
be
of people would be seeing it. Yes. Yeah.
Well, Phil, this has been such an honor. I am so pleased to have been able to share this space with you today.
Thank you. And I hope it helped our viewers out there.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and tune into the next episode. The name who is on our walls, the legend himself, Phil Lobel. Thank you so much. This has been such a pleasure.
Thanks, Solange.